was interesting, this escalation in the conflict, given the very, very spineless position our government has taken in regards to our friends in Israel. This acquiescence to the virtue signalling of these so-called sanctions ahead of a conference that our diplomats wanted to attend at the UN on a two-state solution, a conference that, of course, has been cancelled in light of the heroic actions of the IDF in ending the nuclear capability of the regime in Iran. Also, some hope, I must say, that the oppressed people of Iran can overthrow those who keep them in such terrible conditions. And I note that most of the expat community in New Zealand are welcoming what the Israelis have done. I have talked to friends in Israel and indeed was at a function last night at the Jewish Centre in Auckland where many people are concerned at the casualties that have occurred, though it must be said that the civilian casualties in Israel are nothing compared to the loss of life in Gaza, clearly. But I would make this observation, and the strikes into Iran have been against military personnel and military targets exclusively, whereas the retaliatory attacks from Iran have simply been at population centres, it would seem to me. Thankfully, the casualties are low. So, which all is by way of preamble to our next guest, who I want to spend some time talking to. His name, and I met him for the first time yesterday. His name is Colonel Michael Scott, though he's no longer serving. He is a 30-year veteran of the Australian military forces. He is decorated. He has vast experience, including in the conflicts in East Timor, where he served alongside New Zealanders, Bougainville, Afghanistan, the surge in Iraq, and I think most pertinently at present, this man has spent several years with the United Nations in a senior command position in the Middle East, actually based in Israel. Michael, which is what I'll call him, is no longer serving. He has been doing studies, and he has set up a foundation called the 2023 Foundation, which is designed to win the peace after Israel, one suspects, wins the war. We will get to that. But firstly, I want to welcome Michael, who joins us by video link from Auckland. Michael, how are you? Nice to see you, mate. You're looking well. We got you
Sean,
there.
great to be joining you today.
And really, I want to just at this moment in time start by talking, and I can't think of anyone better to talk to today about the military side of what's happening, and we'll get into other things, but we've got plenty of time. Everyone's calling this an escalation. Everyone's saying this is World War III. Everyone's saying Israel's declared war. In the context of the tensions and the military activities in that part of the world, is this really that surprising, or a pretty logical development and progression of a conflict that's been going on for a long time?
Yeah, Sean, they're really great questions that a lot of people in communities, plural, are grappling with at the moment. For me, someone that has tracked from afar the rhetoric coming out of Tehran since 1979, it's been really simple and consistent. Death to the little Satan, Israel, and death to the big Satan, the United States. And as a father and as a humanist in Australia, I take that as death to the civilization, the Western civilization that people in Australia and New Zealand have grown up in for decades. And so, to paraphrase Douglas Murray, when genocidal psychopaths say that they want to exterminate a people, you ought believe them and listen to them. And so it's been my judgment for some time that a non-kinetic solution was not possible. It was tried, but to come to an agreement, you've got to require two parties to demonstrate a level of goodwill. And so we've actually seen other approaches, compromising, apologising, that haven't worked. So in my judgment, the Israeli government, with the support of partners and allies across the Western world, and I must say a number of Arab nations in the Middle East that get it and understand it. They just can't broadcast it in open sources. Conducted the only actions and outcomes that are prudent in this regard.
So you would agree with the assessment, no choice but to do this?
I think that the rhetoric has been fiery, and to paraphrase Churchill, every opportunity, every other course of action has been tried and failed, and so there was a clarity at the path forward.
Okay. Was this done, do you think, with the acquiescence or the knowledge of the United States, or have they constructed a narrative of plausible deniability for their own diplomatic reasons?
My prima facie observations is two big things have happened recently. One, the strikes and the fusion of intelligence, special operations, whether that be by uniformed personnel or secret agents, with other elements of the Israeli Defence Forces, have come together in a well-planned and well-implemented series of effects that to non-military ears I'd simply explain as a Leonard Cohen poem sung by Andrea Bocelli. It's about as close to perfection as human beings.
In terms of a military operation, in terms of planning and execution.
Yeah,
okay.
And it's kind of prima facie because I think we're only 2 or 3 days into what may be weeks or months in an action-reaction, counteraction cycle. But the other big thing that I think we can think back on just the last 3 or 4 months, where in the digital age where we're expecting a 24-hour news cycle and to know the ins and outs of what world leaders may be thinking, there's been a level of deception that has caught some real monsters in Tehran napping, to the extent that some of the senior leaders of a genocidal regime that believe not only death to Israel, but death to your family and mine, because these people see the world as a binary Dar al-Harb, Dar al-Islam, the world of war, the world of Islam. They were lulled into what has proven to be a false sense of security, and as a consequence, they've met their maker. And I think one of the immediate reflections that we all should take away from this is perhaps we shouldn't believe every eye raise or every message that is pumped out on social media or in a press conference. One of the ways that I try to iron out the bumps is to imagine in such moments what a historian 50 years from now would find apposite reporting on these seismic events. And it's certainly not what was said at 2 p.m. yesterday by, insert appointment holder. I've learned not to listen to rhetoric. I follow actions. And that's one of the other two big takeaways I've made from the last 72 hours.
We have, though New Zealand has forgotten, it was announced by our government some time ago, we have 8 personnel, I understand, operating out of Riyadh, with the Americans and a coalition of people who are involved in intelligence gathering, analysis, and targeting of targets primarily associated with keeping the Straits of Hormuz open and countering the Houthis. Is it likely that they and the work they are doing somehow contributed to the strike on Tehran, on Iran or not?
Look, I couldn't actually comment on that, but if we look at Western liberal democracies that benefit and believe in free market economics, the rule of law, the emancipation of women, support for minorities in all of our communities, I think that our nations all have a vested interest in making sure the waterways, say from the Middle East, that provides much of the world's petrochemicals that our societies rely on to run schools, hospitals, and other critical infrastructure. I'm certainly supportive as a father and a taxpayer in Australia for members of my military to support collective security events. I couldn't comment on the ins and outs, and indeed there's no place for me to know such information.
Yeah. I take it too, and I made reference in your introduction that you held a senior post in the Middle East with the United Nations for some time. They've got nothing to do with this, right? The time for peacekeeping is over. I take it the United Nations is simply a non-player in this conflict in any way.
Oh, look, I think it's an important stakeholder, but in the last couple of years, we've seen some of the limitations of transnational institutions. One of the observations that I've experienced and indeed reported on in my capacity as the CEO and founder of a global charity to combat anti-Semitism is that institutions that we rely on have been taken over by activists and, in my judgment, social Marxists. The United Nations has deported itself in a way over recent time that I think is less than optimal. And I'm aware that some of the democracies of the world that have been footing the bill are rightly saying, well, look, we're not seeing the return on our investment. Maybe it's prudent for us to withhold money until measures of performance and effectiveness are established and some improved behaviour is seen. The world really needs a means to communicate that the United Nations provides, but we've seen some of the limitations at the moment, and there's been adverse consequences as a result.
I'd like to add just at this point that you speak for yourself entirely here, not for the Australian military nor for the Australian government. Michael, just getting back to what has happened in recent days, we've seen retaliatory strikes, we've seen ballistic missiles, Haifa, Tel Aviv, various other places in Israel. Firstly, from your knowledge of those weapon systems, are they precise or are they general in their targeting nature?
Yeah, look, to the extent of my knowledge, which is acquired from open source research, some of the missiles that are fired by a fanatical regime in Iran are the diameter of a vehicle. And so we've seen the pictures of incoming from Gaza and other locations and the Iron Dome and the 4 levels of ballistic missile defence. It's my understanding that some of those ballistic missiles that would flatten 400-metre diameter if impacted without interdiction, we're probably seeing some of the damage and the loss of life in civilian centres of Tel Aviv being the residual kinetic energy of those munitions after interdiction.
Okay. And after they've been shot, they still fall to the ground and cause damage, right? But my question, I guess, is, are the Iraqis targeting military facilities the way the Israelis are, or are they just lobbing a few over?
Look, the Iranians and the Israelis in this conflict, there seems to be, again, no moral equivalence. There's a democracy with all of the checks and balances and a radical, fanatical regime that I don't believe speaks for the 90 million Persians.
Equally though, Michael, we look at the civilian casualties in Gaza and the destruction of what appeared to be civilian areas, neighbourhoods, whole cities, whole towns. And I'm only talking from what I've seen on the YouTube. I know there are going to be some people who are saying, well, suck it up, Israel, look what you did down in Gaza.